Welcome to r/Reddit Revenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you friends for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. My internet provider was fooled by the same fine print that fooled me. The second story. Client has a habit of running off workers and taking advantage of them/the company who sent them. The third story. Supervisor gave my wife a schedule making her work every holiday, so she quit the day before a major holiday. On to the first story. Try and use small print to fool customers? I'll use it to fool you, internet and cable provider. I live in a third world country, so fortunately I don't have to deal with an internet and cable provider such as Comcast, but SH companies exist everywhere. My provider may have good service, but their customer support is awful. Last week I was at work when I got a call from my SO, telling me that there's a man from the cable company at the gate, wanting to know some personal information. I was not expecting anyone from them, so I quickly called up their customer support line and asked if they were sending people out to houses today. They said they had no clue. Like I said, I live in a third world country, and this is one of the tactics that thieves use. They say that they're from the cable company, and when the homeowner goes out to the gate, they pull out a gun and force their way into the house. I told my SO not to go outside and to be careful. Turns out that they were indeed from the cable company, and because we wouldn't give them the information that they were asking for, they cut my cable and internet. They also left a pamphlet with some of their current package deals. As you can imagine, I was furious. I've always paid on time, so there was absolutely no reason for them to cut my cable. Knowing how thieves work in our country, it was very stupid of them to send over people unannounced. I went to one of their stores and spoke with their manager. I explained the situation. He understood, apologized, and quickly made some calls. He said someone would be over right away to get my cable connected. To my surprise, they had it fixed in under 30 minutes. Wonderful. I was still peeved off, but at least it got fixed quickly. After I got home, I took a look at the pamphlet that they had left. Turns out that they had an offer where I could double my internet speed and still pay less than what I was currently paying. Awesome. And they also had some great prices on basic cable, an HD package, and an HD DVR box. Even more awesome. All I had to do was sign a 1-year contract with them. I had no problem with that. So back I go to the store I had just left an hour ago and talked to a service representative. They had no problem with the internet package, but they couldn't find the offer in their system that had those prices for cable television. They asked me to take a seat while the representative talked to the manager and showed him a photocopy of the pamphlet I had. While I sat waiting, I took a closer look at the pamphlet, and what did I see next to the prices? The dreaded asterisk. F those asterisks. I scanned the pamphlet looking for the fine print, and I found it. For me to get those prices, I had to also get the premium HBO and Fox packages. That was $20 more. I rarely watch cable, so that's a waste of money. Now, what happened next I can only imagine happened partly because the manager knew that I had just been screwed by them, by having my internet and cable cut off for no reason at all, but also mostly because neither the representative or the manager saw the asterisk, or the fine print in the pamphlet, and they were ignorant of their own deals. The representative called me over and told me that they were going to honor the prices in the pamphlet. She printed off the contract, I signed, and now I have double my internet speed and I'm paying a whole lot less. The second story is, do you really want to call my boss? Alright, I'll call her for you and put her on speaker. This gentleman was a client of mine who required help with housework 3 times a week, or so the company was told prior to me being assigned to him. I'm really easygoing, and as long as nobody is in danger or anything of that sort, I can bend a rule here and there or accept humans aren't perfect. However, issues with this man arose almost instantly. His file listed all his health issues, what I'm needed to do in the house, and listed NOK, next of kin, as a daughter who does not reside on the property, hence why I was needed. This is important info to remember. It was nothing I couldn't handle, but what the file couldn't tell me was that all others assigned to him previously, co-workers I know well enough to trust without blinking, ran for the hills after 1 shift, maybe less. I was warned he was difficult, but I got into this job after caring for dementia patients in the family, so how much more difficult could it be? The house had a permanent smell of sickness, smoke, and rotted ketchup, but yet was not the worst I had dealt with. A little bleach, some gloves, and peppermint oil in my mask and it was cut down by 60%. My real issue came from the fact that the #1 rule is that the client, or NOK, must be on site for the whole shift. Obviously, right? But this gentleman often got home after I arrived and left well before I did. Annoying? Yes. Potentially problematic for me if something came up missing? Yep. But I kept notes of everything from my boss, and she assured me that as long as I kept my client files up to date, not to worry too much. She was annoyed but not with me. So each day I'd keep note of what I did and how often the client vanished. However, by the second week, he stepped in it deep. I showed up on time. The client, I waited 45 minutes, mostly so I could finish my lunch I'd grabbed on the way over. A good burger is a terrible thing to waste, you know. I stayed outside other than a 30-second walkthrough of the house to make sure he was not on the property. Technically, I'm not allowed in the homes without a client there, but after a few shifts, it's up to the worker and client if that happens or not. Personally, I'm not comfortable in the home without a client or NOK. After the 45 minutes, I gathered my things and prepared to leave, but the client showed up and demanded to know why I had not started cleaning yet. I responded with, "Company rules, sir. Workers cannot be inside the home without a client/NOK around." He rolled his eyes and commanded me to just get to it. Strike one. I followed him inside and he started telling me what he wanted me to do. Fair enough. However, I told him how company rules and the client contract stated he was to remain on the property the whole time I was there, since that was the whole point of me being there. He lost his mind and began screaming and swearing on me about how I was lying and he wasn't a babysitter. Strike two. Then the usually locked back room door opened and his daughter emerged. Turns out she lives in the home. Remember, he told the company/me that she did not live there, which is why he qualified to be a client at all, and had been hiding in the bedroom the whole time I was there. That made things make more sense. I'd clean one room, move on to another, and come back to room one and find things different to how I left them, and always heard footsteps, but never found anybody in the home with me. Strike three, I'm out. Yes, I could have just left when he was not there on arrival, or when he got snarky with me, but given his client info, I let it slide because he's human, and sometimes we can all be a bit rude. She demands what's wrong, and he demands to speak to my boss, because I'm an effing liar, and he's gonna get me fired. Hoo boy. I thought I smelled burnt toast because my brain went silent. I asked him, "Are you sure you want to speak to her?" He basically spat at me and hissed, "Yes, it's your job to do as I say." I nodded and dialed her number, putting it on speaker. I knew how this would end, and did my best to stay close to watch the fireworks. He screamed and swore at my boss and demanded I be fired. My boss is a sweet but no-nonsense woman. I respect her a lot despite only personally interacting with her 3 times. I got this job back in March, and largely only deal with the 2 workers below her, who deal with clients and payroll, both of which actually knew me previously as NOK for my great-grandparents, when this company helped with them when their dementia got too bad for just us to deal with it, which is why I chose to start working for them as soon as an opening came about. She was quiet, a sign most people would know as "you effed up." Not this client, however. He continued roaring down the phone at her until she simply said, "I'm going to transfer this call to client payroll 1/CPR1. Within moments, she was on the line, and before he could get his breath to unleash his rage on her, she simply said, "Me is right. You are legally required by our contract and policy to be on the property while me is there. They've been patient with you and have given you chances that most others have not. However, after today, me is no longer your worker. Actually, you can just go home now and enjoy your weekend. Your updated client list for the week is in your inbox." She then hung up. I suspect she has a heavier phone, so the slam is more satisfying. Of course, I was already halfway down the driveway, since it was within my rights to leave before the call. I just wanted to see his face when she told him I was right. I got home and sure enough, my updated list was in the inbox with a note of "call the office ASAP." So I did, and my boss apologized for me having to deal with that. She then handed the call to CPR1, who already had all my notes, but went over them again and added that day's events to them. She also apologized and promised she'd never send another worker over to his house. He'd been fired as a client, and she'd sent a warning to all our sister locations and rival companies. It's actually more like cousin locations, because we're all extended family, so that he couldn't abuse anybody again. So the only way he'd be able to reapply is if a doctor personally called us and got him set up with us in the event his health gets to where he is 100% unable to do things himself. To us anyway. Cousin locations can choose to take him on if they wish, but the names of the workers he's burned through is attached to his file, so even if we went to a new company, we'd never be sent to him again. CPR2 then got on the phone. CPR1 is a busy woman after all, and she's all too happy to tell me she's happy someone finally stood up to him, and how she was actually proud of me, because I'm super shy and never speak up to defend myself. She then tells me that since his daughter lives on the property, he's been caught in a lie and may have to pay back the government since they paid the company to send him workers. The last story is, give an awful schedule and you'll have to work extra. As anyone would be able to tell from my previous comments, I'm a doctor. My wife and I met at the hospital when I was a resident and she was a student, and she ultimately got a very good job at the hospital, with no help from me. Her new boss was shocked when she found out we had been dating for almost a year. We got engaged, and during my last year of training, we got married. For people who don't know how much resident physicians are paid, my wife made significantly more money than I did at the time. Right before we got married, I signed a contract with a practice that would move us out of the state at the end of June about a year later. She enjoyed her job, and her supervisor was very nice to her at first. We had a beautiful wedding and a fantastic honeymoon. When we came back to work, we were both deliriously happy. That is until she walked in that Monday afternoon. Her boss looked at her without cracking a smile and says, "Why did you come back? You're a doctor's wife now." Mind you, my wife made a lot more than me. Her boss was no longer Smiles at that point. She worked second shift, while I was primarily day work. We would see each other 10 minutes in the afternoon and then some weekends. In her job, she had to take call a week at a time, rotating between about 5 people, which would sometimes get her out in the middle of the night. It was not unusual for her to spend most of Saturdays and Sundays at the hospital as well. When her schedule for the first 6 months of the new year came out, with her supervisor knowing she was leaving in June, she thought that it was a little harsh. She showed it to me and I realized just how masterful a job her supervisor had done to totally screw up her next 6 months. She had scheduled her to work every major and minor holiday from January through May. New Year's Day, MLK Day, Valentine's Day, Easter weekend, during the sport events that went on for a week in April where we lived, and finally Memorial Day. Much of the schedule was not overtly dubious, but there were many subtleties that caused major effects. Instead of call rotating 1 week on, 4 weeks off, my wife was scheduled for a week, then 2 weeks off, then another week, then 3 weeks off. All to get it to fit with the holidays. We were already scheduled to be off the week of Valentine's Day, and already had plane tickets purchased. Her boss told her that she wasn't allowed to take off that time, because she and her SO had plans. Fortunately, we had an email saved showing that she had approved the time off months earlier. The petty revenge comes in when my wife worked her schedule without complaint. She was scheduled to work Memorial Day weekend, and she already knew that all her coworkers and supervisors had plans and would be out of town. 2 weeks prior to Memorial Day weekend, my wife submitted her notice saying there's just too much to do. We have to pack our house up since we're leaving town 2 weeks later, blah blah blah. The hospital's HR department accepted it without blinking an eye. Since there were no other people to cover her shifts, her supervisor was forced to cancel her trip and cover the holiday weekend. She lost out on plane tickets as well as a deposit for her trip. I had to work that weekend, and I took great pleasure in seeing her supervisor working. In our job capacity, she had to interact with me, and you could tell from her face it looked like she was drinking soured milk. I made it my mission that weekend to speak to her whenever I could. I may have let it slip that my wife was out of town visiting friends that weekend. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a nice day.